Greetings. What I'd like to do in this session is introduce you to some of the characteristics and dilemmas facing managers and leaders. Since the 1950s, the rise of global economies, transportation, information technology, and communication patterns contributed to the emergence of what Peter Drucker called the knowledge society and set the stage for the proliferation of complex organizations. These changing circumstances not only called into question long-held assumptions about the world, but also forced managers and leaders to re-examine how organizations were structured, managed, and led. As the pace of change accelerated, society became more culturally aware and placed a higher value on leadership, learning, and adaptability. Scholars concur that industrial models of organizing characterized by hierarchical and bureaucratic structures and directive management that were inherited from the industrial era are not well suited to emerging knowledge work contexts. Many observe that conventional managers tend to fit the world into their belief systems and use a narrow range of approaches to solve a large array of problems. These psychic prisons inhibit their success, thwart their adaptation, and threaten the organization's survival. There's a lot of truth in the phrase, doing the same things in the same way and expecting different outcomes is a good definition of insanity. Although the prevalence of large, complex organizations is historically recent, much of society's important work is done in or by organizations. Even though they have provided extraordinary benefits to society, they often produce poor service, defective or dangerous products, and often they exploit people in communities and damage the environment. All of these consequences are clearly unacceptable. Here are some general properties of organizations. They're complex. Organizations are populated by a bewildering array of people who have unpredictable behavior, who work in complex structures, use emerging technologies, exhibit conflicting goals, and are embedded in a rapidly changing environment. All of these factors make them hard to understand and predict. They're surprising. It's difficult to determine if outcomes are related to intent. What you intend to happen may be undermined by staff, or a secondary outcome may prove more desirable. They're deceptive. What you see may be camouflaged, and employees may use subterfuge to avoid implementing a plan that they don't support, as is the case with Helen DeMarco. They're ambiguous. Information is often incomplete. Interpretations vary. Ambiguity may be deliberate or simply that organizations are hard to coordinate and control. Here are some sources of ambiguity that face managers and leaders. They're not sure of what the problem is. They're not sure what's going on. They're not sure or can't agree on what they want. They don't have the resources they need. They're not sure who's supposed to do what. They're not sure how to get what they want. And they're not sure if they're successful. Bowman and Deal used the Helen DeMarco case to illustrate deception and error in organizations. Here's a very brief summary of those events. Osborne announces revitalization plan. Helen DeMarco and her colleagues agree it can't work, but they can't tell them. They suggest a study to buy time and develop a strategy. Option B is low benefit at high cost. The team uses technical jargon as camouflage. Helen DeMarco feels frustration, failure. She's torn between protecting her career and doing her job as a professional. Osborne is promoted and hailed as a change agent. The immediate problem is solved, but the long-term issue remains. Here are some common sense organizational diagnoses. When we're unsure of what's going on, we tend to use common sense or simplistic approaches to diagnosing problems, including people blaming. People are the problem. Blame the bureaucracy. Red tape, rigidity, rules and regulations are the issue. Or the thirst for power. Political game playing and dog-eat-dog logic offers a plausible analysis of what may be going wrong, and a convenient explanation. But there may be more to the situation than this simplistic explanation may offer. Each diagnosis may reflect a partial reality, but are oversimplified and may lead to a false sense of understanding, bad decisions, and even worse, solutions. In most instances, managers are asked to make judgments that are based on incomplete evidence. In addition, their decisions depend on their perceptions of circumstances, which are shaped by their beliefs, values, and past experiences. In other words, they tend to make organizations conform to their way of seeing the world, and in most instances, they see what they expect to see. Hence the phrase, "I'll see it when I believe it." An example of this phenomenon is discussed by Bowman and Deal in their 2003 issue, who tell about a deep-sea diver who saw a Budweiser can at 60 feet below the surface of the ocean and described it as being red, even though the spectrum at that depth made it actually yellow. Highly effective managers and leaders may avoid this tendency by mastering the art of reframing. Bowman and Deal also use an example from the Iraq War to illustrate the problem of perception. On April 14, 1994, two U.S. F-15 fighter jet pilots shot down two helicopters that they believed were enemy aircraft. They had incomplete information and filled in the gaps. They saw what they wanted to see and consequently killed 26 UN relief workers on board. This scenario illustrates the power and the problem of our mindsets or mental maps. We depend on mindsets to help us understand what's going on and make decisions. But when we fit the world into our belief system and have inadequate information, we can make some serious mistakes. Managers and leaders are constantly faced with coping with ambiguity. They have a choice of conserve or change. The advantages of relying on existing frames and routines include protecting your investment and learning them. They also make it easier for you to understand what's happening and what to do about it. But you may misread the situation, take the wrong action, and fail to learn from your own errors. In sum, most people resist change as it requires time and energy for learning new approaches. But it's necessary to developing new skills and enhancing your capacity to lead. Are top managers clueless? CEO Jeff Skilling thought Enron was in excellent shape when he quit a few months before it collapsed. Joseph Berendino, CEO of Enron's auditor Anderson Worldwide, said no one told him some of his partners thought the firm was at risk in approving Enron's aggressive accounting practices. Anderson Worldwide failed. As New Orleans recovered from Hurricane Katrina, the Secretary of Homeland Security told reporters he had no reports of things that viewers had already seen on television news. Management error produces bankruptcies of public companies every year. Most mergers fail, but companies keep merging. One study estimates that 50 to 75% of American managers are incompetent, but are not replaced. Most change initiatives produce little change. Some make things even worse. What's the antidote for being clueless and putting your organization and indeed the public in jeopardy? We often use common sense strategies to improve organizations, including better management, consultants, implementing government policy and regulations. However well-meaning, these intentions may produce more costs than benefits, and problems may outlast solutions. The nagging question remains, how can leaders and managers improve the odds for themselves as well as for their organizations? One approach offered is framing and the blink process. Malcolm Gladwell coined the term blink to refer to being able to make snap decisions. Dane and Pratt describe 4 key characteristics of this intuitive blink process. Well-learned and practiced frames facilitate rapid cognition, the capacity to quickly, accurately size up situations. The qualities of rapid cognition include non-consciousness, you can do it without thinking about it, it's fast, holistic, and results in effective judgments. The blink process is based on expert knowledge, time, experience, and the capacity to frame and reframe situations. Bowman and Deal's theoretical frames consolidate major areas of organizational thought and characterize them as frames, or lenses, that may be used as vantage points to help bring different aspects of organizational life into sharper focus and be used as tools for action. Each frame has its strengths and its weaknesses, but when all 4 are mastered, they provide a comprehensive picture of what's going on in organizations. As discussed previously, the 4 frames include the structural frame, the human resource frame, the political frame, and the symbolic frame. The structural frame draws upon the field of sociology and emphasizes the importance of formal roles and relationships. Organizational charts are created to depict formal relationships and official communication patterns used to coordinate activities. Managers allocate responsibilities to participants, including division of labor, creating rules, regulations, and policies to handle routine work, and managers make decisions when there are exceptions. When the structure does not fit the situation, then managers are expected to reorganize or restructure the organization to ensure its efficiency. The human resource frame draws upon the field of social psychology and is based on the premise that organizations are inhabited by individuals who have needs, feelings, and dispositions, as well as the capacity to learn and defend established attitudes and beliefs, in other words, the ways of doing work. This frame advances the notion that the key to effectiveness is to tailor organizations to meet the needs of people while getting the job done. Chester Barnard, a neo-structuralist, noted that a successful organization meets the needs of both the organization and its worker. The political frame draws upon the field of political science and views organizations as arenas in which different interest groups compete for power and scarce resources. Laswell notes that politics is about the distribution of resources, who gets what, when, and how. Conflict is a normative part of organizational life because individuals and groups have different needs, perspectives, and values. Coalitions form around specific interests, and bargaining, negotiating, coercion, and compromise are part of everyday organizational life. Many problems arise because power is either concentrated in the wrong places in an organization, or it's so dispersed that nothing gets done. Finding workable solutions requires political acumen, skill, coalition building, and compromise. The symbolic frame draws upon the fields of social and cultural anthropology and are less rational than structural, human resource, and political frames. This frame emphasizes that organizations are driven and understood more by observing rituals, ceremonies, stories, heroes, and myth than by invoking rules, regulations, policies, or relying on managerial authority. Organizations are viewed as theater in which actors play out their roles to affirm their leadership, purposes of the organization, direction, and interpret meaning of events for internal and external audiences. Problems arise when actors play their roles badly, symbols lose their meaning, and when rituals and ceremonies lose their importance. Effective leaders can use stories, symbols, and myths to convey meaning, affirm the purpose of the organization, as well as the value and support of members in achieving commonly held goals. Bowman and Deal depict expanding management thinking in the following table that juxtaposes traditional with artistic thinking. The notion of conceptual pluralism illustrates the idea of how each frame may bring specific problems into sharp focus, and how, when taken together, they provide a complete picture of what is happening. For example, Akira Kurosawa's film Rashomon tells a story of medieval Japan as seen through the eyes of 4 witnesses. Each person viewed the same event, yet their background and experiences influenced what they saw. No single story was the truth, yet it was their story. It was their truth. Each person's story was not enough to make the event understandable, but taken together, they tell what actually happened. Viewing events in organizations using several perspectives, in other words, reframing, increases leaders' effectiveness. Being able to do this is more like an artist or a filmmaker than a mechanic. Artists reframe the world so others can see new possibilities. Understanding an organization holistically requires that you see it from multiple perspectives, much like you would by walking around a sculpture in a museum. Mastering the art of reframing is crucial to managerial and leader effectiveness. Rather than having the world conform to our internal maps or belief systems, we need to break old patterns and mindsets and develop more useful perspectives that help us see and resolve organizational problems. Effective leaders need to strive to find ways to avoid system blindness that may inhibit their effectiveness, reduce organizational productivity, and trap them in cycles of blaming, self-defense, and reflexive decision-making. Reframing presents a paradigm shift in thinking about organizations and leading. It's a liberating experience that increases understanding, provides alternative choices of action, and enables leaders to anticipate the twists and turns of organizational life. In conclusion, narrow thinking contributes to clueless managers. Multiple frames improve understanding, broaden perspectives, and increase options that promote versatility. Multiple frames enable reframing, viewing the same thing from multiple perspectives, that enables managers and leaders to understand problems holistically and provide multidimensional solutions. Here are a few things to think about for future discussions. Think about exploring your personal theories and judgments. Talk about the ethical dilemmas in organizational choices. Reflect on your ability to see systems holistically. Discuss how people build theories of action. And also talk about whether most people would invest the time and energy in developing diagnostic skills and abilities to see what's really going on. Thanks.